Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the People on the Go Lunch and Learn webinar. Today's session is Pivot. The only move that matters is your next one. And I have with me Jenny Blake, who I'll be introducing in just a moment. Before we get started, let's just do a quick technology check to make sure that you can hear me just fine and see the screen. Go ahead and locate the questions panel and go to webinar and just type in a brief note, giving me an okay, a hi, hello, all's good, letting me know that the audio is working just fine. Thank you. Hi, Virginia. Hi, Dawn. Hi, Laura, Stella. Thank you so much. By the way, if you are needing assistance, the number to call is right there on the screen, 1-800-263-6317, and I'll also be on the line to help as well. Just a quick background about why we have these sessions, especially for those who are with us for the first time. We have these sessions because our focus is productivity in the workplace, and the topics that you see on the screen are the many topics that we cover. We have some prizes available to you today for joining us. We're giving away 3 copies of Jenny Blake's new book, Pivot, and we're also giving away 3 copies of Pierre Kouan's Perfect 15-Minute Day Journal. Pierre is, of course, our founder and CEO. So stay tuned, and I will let you know how you can have a chance to win these prizes today. All right, and without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Jenny Blake. Jenny Blake is an author, career and business strategist, and international speaker who helps people organize their brain, move beyond burnout, and build sustainable, dynamic careers they love. Jenny is the author of Pivot, The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One, and Life After College. With over a decade of blogging, 2 years at a technology startup as the first employee, 5 years at Google on the training and career development teams, and over 5 years of running her own business, Jenny combines her love of technology with her superpower of simplifying complexity to help clients through big transitions, often to pivot their career or business. Today, you can find her at jennyblake.me, where she explores the intersection of mind, body, and business. You can also find her at her Pivot podcast and on Twitter at Jenny_Blake. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jenny. And this transition will take just a moment here.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate the intro, and big thanks to everybody who is here for today's webinar. I know it's not easy to take an hour out of your busy day and week, so thank you for being here. When people come to me and they're at a pivot point, they don't always have the language to describe it. They say things like, I think I'm going crazy. I don't know what's wrong with me. Am I asking for too much? I just can't do this anymore. I think I'm having a midlife crisis, or I think I'm having a quarter life crisis. Will I ever be happy? What was fascinating to me as I started doing research for this book, and it's been about 3 years now of thinking about this topic and really trying to unpack the pivot, is that no matter their age, life stage, bank account balance, or career level, these are the sentiments that I was hearing from people who were looking for more in their lives, even if they found career success by traditional standards. So I want to reinforce right from the start that we're talking about pivots today. It's going to be an interactive workshop, so I want you to have a pen and paper handy, because by the end of this session, you will walk away with a clearer understanding of what you want to pursue next. And it doesn't have to be drastic career change. You'll see in today's webinar that I'm defining a pivot as your next move, and that can be within your current role, within your company or your business, or of course it can be broader career shifts too. So whatever is top of mind for you today, I encourage you to use that as a topic. You can even apply the method that I'm going to share to a project that you're working on or something that you feel stuck on. When we hear Silicon Valley talk about pivoting, which it does get thrown around a lot in Silicon Valley, this is not a new term by any stretch, but typically when businesses talk about pivoting, it's plan B. They have failed at their initial strategy, and now they need to pivot to save the business from collapse. YouTube used to be a video dating site, Twitter was a podcasting service, and these companies pivoted into now what are billion-dollar businesses and trajectories. But when it comes to our careers, Pivot is the new plan A. What I'm seeing is that pivoting, it seems like we've done something wrong. And the biggest mistake that I made and that I see other people making is taking a pivot personally or a pivot point. But actually, in our careers and for ourselves personally, pivot is often a sign of our success. When we hit a pivot point or a plateau, that's a sign that we've succeeded. We've made it to a certain level in our lives, our career, or our business, and we're ready for more. So, right off the bat, one thing to understand is that this is really the new normal. And pivot is not just a mindset, but a skill. And it's a skill that we can all get better at. For me, I worked for 2 years at a startup, and one of my small tasks there was managing our Google AdWords accounts. And then I leveraged that experience to pivot over to Google doing AdWords product training. So very similar connection there. When I hit a plateau within Google, I pivoted from AdWords product training to coaching and career development and running a global drop-in coaching program. When I kind of hit a plateau with that 2.5 years later, I pivoted to leave Google and launch my own business as my first book was coming out in 2011 to what I was doing coaching and career development at Google, and I pivoted to do those things, but now self-employed. And I thought that was my big career pivot. That was my quarter life crisis. But no, 2 years into running my own business, once again, I hit a plateau and I found myself asking, what's next? And although my first book, Life After College, did well, I knew I didn't want to talk about that for the rest of my career. So here I was again, struggling with this question, what's next? And watching as my bank account balance dwindled down to zero, because this time I didn't have a steady paycheck to fund that exploration. And as I looked at how every few years this kept happening to me, I came to one of two conclusions. One, there's either something wrong with me and I'm destined to be unhappy for the rest of my career. Or two, this midlife or quarter life crisis feeling state is accelerating and we're all going to be experiencing it more often. As I started doing research for the book and interviewing people, it was really the latter that proved to be true. That right now in our culture, we only have two things. You're allowed a midlife crisis or a quarter life crisis, and that's it. We don't have language for changing and switching outside of that. But because of the state that our economy is in, with automation and outsourcing and globalization and even social media, we're all being asked to ask and answer this question, what's next, more frequently than in years past. So if we can start to see pivot as the new normal, we are more empowered to proactively take steps to understand where we want to go, and so that we can be proactive about pivoting and not wait until we get pivoted. As I thought about, well, who are the most agile careerists? Who is really good at this? And I realized, and even who will this message resonate with, that there's a really special type of person. And in an article for Fast Company, the editor-in-chief, Robert Safian, he calls this Generation Flux. And he says that Fluxers have a willingness to adapt and they're open to change, and that it's a psychographic, not a demographic. The demographic is age or gender specific, and that this psychographic is really about a mindset. We've all heard the term high net worth. These are individuals who've accumulated a lot of financial resources in their lifetime, and so we say they're high net worth individuals. But for the people whom this message will resonate with most, I found that they define themselves by something else. It's that psychographic that I mentioned. They're high net growth individuals are people who money's important, but it's not everything. They're often willing to take a pay cut, bootstrap a business, make a lateral move in order to continue learning and growing. And when their needs for growth are being met, they often then look toward meaningful work and ultimately making an impact. So I call them impactors for short. Impactors are naturally going to hit pivot points more frequently because they are constantly asking, how can I learn? How can I grow? How can I contribute? So again, part of what I want to impart on everyone today is that there's nothing wrong. If you've hit a pivot point or a plateau, there's nothing wrong with you, and it doesn't have to be a crisis. And actually, it's a sign of our success. So instead of shaming and blaming people for being entitled, which I would say millennials get a pretty bad rap, for being entitled in this way. Actually, people are smart to prioritize meaningful work because work that isn't meaningful and that doesn't make an impact is very quickly going to go away. And of course, this is not to say, of course, there are some people who are truly entitled, and I don't recommend that, nor do I encourage reckless job hopping. That's not the answer here either. So pivots, once again, can be within your existing role, within your organization. It's a framework to be agile and to think about what's next in a smart, methodical way. Typically, when we think about our career growth, we're kind of going over time, and then boom, we hit a pivot point. And that's where, when we look ahead, we start to sense a plateau. A plateau is this feeling that I am a little bored, or for some of you, it might be a whisper, like, psst, there's more out there for you, or what you've been doing isn't gonna be that exciting for the next few years, or something missing. If we don't pay attention to the plateau, it can often turn into decline, where we start having physical signals that it's time to make a change, like getting sick more often, getting headaches at work. I had a friend who got panic attacks every time she got off the subway on her way to the office. So if we don't pay attention to these pivot points and plateaus, often our body will start sending signals. At this point, our choice is to pivot. And while there is some risk involved, it doesn't have to be a blind leap. There's something in the book, I share a diagram called the riskometer. And if you look back at this pivot diagram, the pivot can vary in degree as far as how small of a move or how big of a move the pivot is. So on the riskometer, you can see here that if we are not changing at all, we're often in our stagnation zone. Then there's the comfort zone where work's fine or our business is fine. The stretch zone is optimal. It's the optimal range for change, where we feel challenged and engaged and like we're really growing and making an impact. But if we try and turn too sharply and pivot too far from where we currently are, that's what sends us into our panic zone, where it's more of a sense of paralysis. So pivots, especially career pivots, can often trigger some of our biggest fears because they threaten, or they seem to threaten, our most fundamental needs on Maslow's hierarchy of food, clothing, and shelter. So if I told you all here on this webinar today, oh, just quit your job tomorrow or fold your business and pursue your passion, it would probably send you into your panic zone. So the key to a pivot is that it's a methodical shift in a new related direction based on a foundation of your strengths and what is already working. It's so critical to understand that a pivot is not a 180. And I'm going to be sharing a 4-stage pivot method for really unpacking what's next. But you can think of the analogy of a basketball player. When they stop dribbling, one foot stays firmly grounded and rooted in the floor. Those are your strengths. That's what's already working, who you already know, what you're already good at, what you already have experience in. Then from that source of stability, you can use your pivot foot to scan for passing options around the court. So the key thing about a pivot, and what makes a career pivot different than a business pivot, where, as I mentioned, just the kind of former use of the term that, the business has failed, we have to pivot, or the business has a forecast of failure. In a career pivot, you're actually saying the pivot is about doubling down on what's working. And that's how you propel something forward. So whether you're self-employed or you work within an organization, you can ask yourself, what am I enjoying the most about my day-to-day work? Who are my favorite clients? What are my favorite projects? What's bringing me the most energy and challenge and excitement? We're going to be doing some reflection exercises. So first, I just want you to recognize that this is likely something you've already done. Although I'm sharing a framework and a new language around pivoting, you've already done this before. You're not even starting from scratch in terms of your knowledge of doing this. So think about, try and complete this sentence. You can jot this down on a piece of paper. For your last pivot, or one that's very memorable to you, I pivoted from A to B by leveraging C. So I'll give another example. I pivoted from the AdWords training team to the career development team at Google by going to coach training on nights and weekends, and I joined a 10% project to make drop-in coaching as easy to sign up for as a massage, so that a year later, when the career development team was formed, I was perfectly positioned to take the role. And there was one open role. So okay, go ahead and jot down, and I'd love for you to share in the question area your pivot, and we'll read some of these out loud just because it's really fun to hear how people moved from one thing to the next. And again, these pivots often have some core element in common, whether it's the industry or your job role or even a specific person who helped you make that pivot. So, Melissa, if you see any come in on the questions, would be great for you to share some of these,
You
and
got
then
it,
we can
Jenny.
also
Everyone
share
looking
at the end.
for, yeah, thank you. Everyone looking forward to seeing your comments here. If you want to fill out this question here or fill out this sentence, I'll get it started, Jenny, myself. So I pivoted from communications work at a nonprofit to have more time in my schedule working from home by leveraging my marketing skills and seeking outside training, if that helps,
Hmm.
if that fits the
Yeah.
criteria.
And then was that pivot to people on the go, or were you doing something previously that was part-time?
You know what? Yeah, pretty much from people on the go, but I also started picking up social media work probably before that. So yeah, that probably was kind of in between there.
There's so many great things about what you described, that you had the vision of what you wanted, which was more flexible part-time work. You
Yes.
went and took classes and bolstered your skills. You started some projects or clients on the side, and then it all has naturally built to where you are now. I
Yeah,
love it.
that's very true.
And you pivoted your location in the last year.
Yes, yeah, it really did. I'm a pivoter for sure. We have a few responses here. These are great. All right, Sherry shared, I pivoted from VP of HR to self-employed learning and development consultant by leveraging the classroom and on-the-job coaching I had done internally.
Amazing. That's
Very
fantastic. How exciting.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Very cool. Here we go from Laura. I used my workforce planning skills as an analyst in one state agency to become a manager at another state department where I know my new career is.
Great. Love it. Thank
All
you
right.
so much for sharing these.
Yeah, and we got one more here from Kat and a few others. But thank you so much, everyone, for your submissions. Kat here, in the way of higher education or furthering education, I pivoted from a good salary to a great salary by getting a master's degree.
That's master's grad school is such a great example of a intermediary pivot too. Sometimes we know what we want two moves out, and by doing something like getting a master's degree, you work your way there, almost like a parallel parking job. I
Awesome.
love it. Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing these. Let's move into the actual pivot method now. So, this is where you will get to apply this to a question that you have about what's next. Again, whether it's on a project or in your career more broadly or in a business or a side hustle, really you can apply it to anything. And I'll also say, for those of you who are people managers or mentors or even friends and want to pilot, you can also use this method as a guide for coaching conversations. That it's so often, especially with friends and family, even we focus on what's not working and we kind of complain or we jump to giving advice. So this can be a nice way for you to practice framing the conversation for other people to facilitate their thinking as well. The first stage, as I mentioned, the basketball player, the first stage is plant, and it's the one most people want to skip, especially for go-getters. They think, I'm at a pivot point. What's out there? And they immediately start looking outside of themselves for answers, myself included. This is the biggest mistake that I made that kept me spinning in place for far too long, was that I was so focused on what wasn't working, what I didn't know, what I didn't have, that it didn't put any fuel in the tank for me or propel the conversation forward. So it wasn't until, like the basketball player analogy, I really went and looked at my foundation. What had I already accumulated up to this point? What's important to me? What were my strengths? How was I already earning a living? What was I enjoying most? And vision. This is another really critical piece that people want to skip because it can feel fuzzy. But what is your 1 year vision? I think any farther out is challenging. If you happen to know 2 or 3 years, that's great. In the case of the person who mentioned getting a master's degree, you might know, oh, what you want to do after that. But things are changing so quickly in our economy that I find it pointless to ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years? We don't know. Even the iPhone was not invented until 2007, which is not even 10 years ago, and has since created billion-dollar businesses and apps and app companies. So setting a 1-year vision puts a pin in this. It's, where do you want to end up? A year from now, what would smashing success look like? How do you want to feel? What types of projects are you working on? What kind of impact do you want to have? And then once you have this foundation of your known variables, and again, you don't have to know everything about where you want to end up, and certainly not even how you want to get there, but just start to articulate what you do know about what success looks like. Now we have brackets for our pivot, and we can much more effectively and efficiently close the gap in between where you are now and where you want to end up. So for the first reflection, I'm going to give you 1 minute. Jot down as many things as you possibly can for what you're currently enjoying the most in your day-to-day work. What's working the best? And I encourage you, if you think you're done and I haven't called time, keep going, because it usually means that you've thought of everything obvious that you already know. And so when you want to lift your pen, that's when the new ideas actually start to arrive. Take 1 minute starting now. Time. Part two, what does success look like 1 year from now? Go big. A lot of people, when I first ask this, they'll write down what seems reasonable, pragmatic, safe. That's okay. You could write those down. But I do also want you to think about what would be really exciting. What would you be just thrilled to have happening a year from now? And at least give yourself the range. Just don't censor now. We're going to break it down into smaller next steps later. So now's not the time to censor. Really write everything that comes to mind and don't lift your pen from the page. 1 minute starting now. Time. Moving along, back to the basketball player analogy. Once you're firmly rooted in the plant stage, which we just did the exercises for, now you can use that other half of you to scan for opportunities. And with the scan stage, you're looking for three things: people, skills, and projects. So who would be exciting to connect with? Who do you admire? Who's already doing what you want to do? You can take bits and pieces, and not even everyone you list will be people you have direct access to. Some you're going to learn or be inspired from by afar. Skills, typically where we are now and where we want to end up, there's some skill gaps. So Melissa graciously shared her story and about plugging those skill gaps or getting a master's degree. Those are things that we do to build our way into where we want to end up. And that's what's so exciting about a pivot, is the growth opportunities involved. And then projects, if you start to have inklings about types of work that would be exciting to tackle, even if you don't know the full scope of the picture yet, that can be very helpful as well. So now take 1 minute to jot down as many ideas as you can about who you admire and who you can talk to. And those may be one and the same, or they may be different. And I encourage you to put some maybe peers you want to connect with, people slightly farther ahead of you in their field or industry, or where you can learn from afar, and then go a little stretchy. Just people who would be really exciting to connect with, or again, kind of learn and observe from what they're doing that feels really exciting to you. Time. Part two, what new skills interest you? And here I encourage you to think about both professional skills and personal ones. So these don't all have to be work related, and go sideways. Some of it can be really wacky and seem unrelated, but they're all helpful clues. So it could be anything from taking classes to like professional skills development classes to learning Italian or salsa dancing, just anything that feels exciting to you and that you're really curious about. You can even kind of, and I encourage you to build off of what you wrote in the plant stage, both your current strengths, what could you double down on, and your vision. What would take you closer to it? Time. Stage three, pilot. This is where it starts to get fun. And you can see that once you have some hypotheses about what you're scanning for and who you can connect with and skills and projects, now it's time to come up with small experiments. A good experiment should answer the three E's. One, do I enjoy this new direction? Two, can I become an expert at it? And three, is there room to expand in the market? And the market could be either within your current role, within your organization, within your business if you're self-employed. So that's a good pilot. And the key here about piloting is that we don't know. You know, if you knew exactly where you wanted to end up next and how to get there, you would be doing it. You would not be at this pivot point. So the key about piloting and what actually makes pivoting a much smoother process and it makes the pivot points less jarring is constantly having a mindset of experimentation. So within your role, what are some 10 or 20% projects that you can do to help you test these three E's and help you build toward a future launch, which is the fourth stage? And I like to think of pilots, to switch metaphors for a moment, like racehorses at the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby. We might not know yet which one is going to take off, but one may pull ahead in the lead, and then that's a clear indicator to double down on it. But you won't know that until you get some going. So now I want you to brainstorm for 1 minute, what experiments could you run in the next month? And these are things that you could take action on pretty quickly. Some might be stretchy and edgy, but for the most part, pretty doable. So again, maybe it's an info session you sign up for, a lunch meeting you schedule. Go ahead and brainstorm as many as you can. And if you run out of ideas, look back at what you wrote in the plant and scan stages and try and pull pilot ideas out of those. Time. All right, now take 1 minute to brainstorm in the next 6 months. These are bigger pilots or bigger projects that you could take on, and I encourage you to envision things in your stretch zone. So this would put us to about February of 2017. What would you love to have happening by the end of February and really reconnect with your 1 year vision? what experiments would move you closest to that vision that you identified? Time. Once you had, and by the way, I encourage you to do more of this brainstorming later. We're spending 1 minute on each of these. Sometimes with coaching clients, I spend 1 month or more. So you can really do more than we are currently. But moving along into the fourth stage launch, let me first say, so ideally you reduce risk enough by piloting. You can see on our graph here that we're kind of moving further ahead. So by the time you launch, it's not a leap of faith. It's not a blind leap. You've reduced risk, though there is still some sense of risk remaining. You have reduced it, and you feel pretty positive and well informed about your new direction. The pivot cycle, you can repeat plant, scan, pilot over and over until you feel ready for a launch or that you need a launch. So if you're self-employed, you can constantly be plant scanning and piloting. What's working best? What can I double down on? What's out there? What can I learn? What experiments can I run? And you may not need a bigger launch, though bigger launches might include launching a new product or service offering. If you work in a company, changing teams, launching a new initiative at work, quitting your job to move to another company, quitting your job to start a business. These are the moments that we go all in on a new direction. And so again, you can use the plant scan pilot process as a cycle until it's time to launch. And at that point, how do you know when it's time to launch? When you've run enough pilots, there will come a time where you know, my bigger regret would be to do nothing and to stay in place. And in fact, often when we think we can do that, that's when we get pivoted anyway. So at a certain point, everyone I interviewed for the book who launched, even if their initial pivot plan didn't work out, they never regretted their launch decision, because decisions bring us data and they help us then make a next decision from a new vantage point. So now consider, actually, before I put that slide up, look back at everything you wrote already in exercises and just circle anything that has particular energy to it for you. So circle 3 to 5 things that really have a feeling of excitement to them, of everything that you've written down in the first 3 stages. And now write down, based on everything on your page, and particularly the things that you just circled, what's one small step you can take in the next week. So as a result of this webinar, what's one small thing you're going to do? And what one next step would make the biggest impact? And by the way, I love these 2 questions. You could ask them of yourself at any time. You could ask them on a weekly basis if you wanted. What's one small step you can take in the next week, and what one would make the biggest impact? And I would love for you to share these in the questions area, because it's really fun to hear what next steps everyone else is going to take, and I often get new ideas for myself. So it's inspiring and helpful to the rest of us if you're willing to share what one next step you'll take as a result of this webinar. And we'll have more time for questions at the end. But first, I just want to share one of my favorite quotes from David White. He says, "That which you can plan is too small for you to live." And that to me is a reminder that we can take the pressure off of ourselves to know our whole career map for the next 20 moves. And instead, really, the subtitle of my book, "The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One," that just focus on that and where you want to end up, and trust that the next steps will follow after that. A personal motto that I've developed in recent years: build first, then your courage will follow. We've got to take the steps first, and then we start to feel more courageous. The courage doesn't come first. It comes from taking action. If you want to learn more, the book Pivot launches Tuesday, which is so soon, September 6th. And if you pre-order, you'll get access to $500 worth of courses that I've created, including Systems Ninja, Book Ninja, and Speak Like a Pro. And you'll get early access to the Pivot Toolkit, which has a ton of templates based on everything that I've shared today. You can also check out the Pivot podcast wherever you subscribe to casts. It's not on the slide, but if you would like one-on-one coaching, I have an amazing team of 6 Pivot coaches, and you can sign up for a 1-month jumpstart where it's 2 sessions with email in between to just get the creative juices flowing. That's at pivotmethod.com/coaching. And just for the next week, if you work within an organization, whether you're a manager or an individual contributor, it doesn't matter. You can, sorry, it animated in a funny order, but I've partnered with Actionable Conversations to create a 1-hour pivot workshop in a box that anybody can facilitate. So just for the next week, if you buy 5 books, you'll get the conversation for $200 off. And if you buy 10, you get the conversation for free. So if you want to run a book club within your company, if you buy 10 books, you'll get the facilitator kit to run a pivot workshop, which can be a great way to initiate career development conversations. And again, pivoting doesn't have to mean leaving. It can mean pivoting within one's role or even pivoting the direction of a team. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and make your purchase of 5 or 10 copies and then forward your receipt to jenny@pivotmethod.com and mention this webinar, and we will get you squared away. So without further ado, Melissa, I'll turn it back over to you, and we can also take questions, and I would love to hear what everyone has started to share for next steps.
Thank you so much, Jenny. This is wonderful. And yeah, we're getting a few submissions here. Everyone, if you'd like to send more submissions as you're thinking about them in terms of your next steps, it would be really great to hear them. We'll start out with Liz here. Liz says her supervisor has mentioned she'd like to discuss reclassifying her job. We've spoken in general terms about our desire to do so, but I'm going to schedule a meeting to start defining some specifics and things to do to work towards them.
Nice. Oh, I love it.
Very awesome.
And that's such a great example of, so often pivots involve conversations and sometimes tricky ones. So if you can even apply the pivot method to that conversation and just identify, okay, what does success look like? What's my ideal outcome? And is there anything that would be helpful for me to do to prepare for that going into it?
Wonderful. We'll wait for a few more to come in. Please feel free to share them now. I'm going to go ahead and transition back to my slides, and then we'll get into our Q&A. So also, please feel free to start asking questions in that questions panel also there. Wonderful. And here is Jenny's contact information if you'd like to get in touch with her. And of course, she provided a lot of information as well. And we sent you some handouts, and you can refer to those as well for contact info. Just a few reminders before we get into the Q&A. We do have prizes for you if you joined us later. We are giving away 3 copies of Jenny's new book, Pivot, as well as Pierre Kawand, our founder and CEO, 3 copies of his Perfect 15-Minute Day Journal. And to be entered into the drawing, all that you need to do is simply fill out our feedback form, which will pop up at the end of the webinar once we exit. So that'll just pop up on your screen. Fill it out, and we will go ahead and select the winners from there. I'd also like to invite you to become a member of our online community here at People on the Go. You can visit our blog and our website. You can join our Facebook and LinkedIn groups, Accomplishing More with Less. By the way, that's where we're also going to be posting the recording to this session later, and I'm going to send you an email about that after the session. I also invite you to visit our Perfect 15-Minute Day site or page on Facebook, and our LinkedIn page, and you can follow our founder, Pierre Kawand, on Twitter. Some upcoming webinars. We have Microsoft PowerPoint on September 8th. Our trademark series, Accomplishing More with Less, a 3-part series coming up on the 15th, 22nd, and 29th, and Pivot Tables coming up on the 20th. And you can find more about that and sign up on our website. Great, and now for some questions. Here's a comment here. Sylvia shared, currently attending law school, but I'd like to stay within my organization. So my next step would be to take a look at our corporate structure and identify someone that works in a legal capacity and reach out to them and hopefully begin a conversation so that I can hopefully get ideas on how to transition into that role once I graduate.
I love it. Yeah, people have this misconception, as I mentioned, of like you have to leave the company to pivot. And when coaching clients come to me, the very first thing I ask is what's available internally.
Right.
And it's you'd be amazed at how much you can create your own role within an organization and how much is available. So I love that. That's really cool to be going to law school and start to connect with people who might be able to help you design that next role.
That's great. Wonderful. And then Kat asks, can you give an example of how this strategy could be applied to something personal versus professional, such as health and fitness? Is this something that you've come across,
Oh
Jenny,
yeah.
in your work?
Oh, just for fun, I've thought about how does this apply to dating or
Oh,
yeah, health and fitness. So for both, you could say, well, what do I most enjoy? So what's working the best when it comes to health, whether it's how you eat, how much sleep you need, what fitness resonates with you, and then what doesn't. And then so or dating, how have you met people in the past? What has felt the best? Or even in your current relationship, if you're in one, what's working? And where do we want to end up? Whether it's around health or finding a partner or you're designing with your current partner, what does success look like a year from now? How do you want to feel? What does the average day look like? And so you just define it for that area. And then the scanning is about, okay, cool. What are some ideas I have about how to get there? So with health and fitness, I just signed up for ClassPass. There are so many wacky classes on there, which is really fun actually to just randomly go to. I'm doing a aqua cycling, which is underwater bikes, and I'm not submerged. My, from your torso up is kind of out, but that's so fun. And it's not normally part of my routine, but it's part of my scanning for, do I
Mm,
like this? Do I want to incorporate it regularly? Or you know for
mm,
dating and relationships, I don't like dating apps, so I talk about real life Tinder, just be friendly and get out there. So scanning, like, what activities could I do, where will my people be hanging out? And so yeah, I think you can really apply it to anything. And then when you get to piloting, it's how can I just try a bunch of stuff and gather data, and that doing the action will bring you more information to then incorporate something and really make it a more integrated part. And even if that's how you're eating, I've tried
mhm.
recently intermittent fasting and ketogenic diet, which is a modified Atkins. So anyway, those are things that I didn't know initially if I would like them, but 2 weeks in, I could tell, oh my gosh, I feel so much more energetic. And so that then encouraged me to kind of go all in those new directions.
Very cool. Laura asks here, what are some good ways to track your success during the plant vision and launch process?
Yeah, so tracking, I mean, I love the question because I think it was Oprah who said, celebrate what you want to see more of. I think celebrating wins, big and small, is so important. And some people I know are keeping a done list journal, like what they accomplished every day, that you could do something like that. I
Mhm.
really enjoy having accountability with friends, and I call them in the book friend tours, that we'll either have a weekly call or an ongoing email thread where we write back to the thread and say, here's what I got done and here's what I'm going to focus on next. So there are lots of ways. I mean, just asking the question is a great, I would just pose it back to you and say, what would feel really good as a way to celebrate your ongoing small wins? And I'm so glad that you asked that because, yes, there's so much to celebrate in the plant scan pilot cycle of it, even before or after the big launch moments.
Exactly. And what if you're having trouble kind of, with self, project management in a sense, getting yourself going? Are there ways that you like to kind of hack that and approach that yourself, Jenny, in your own business to kind of keep yourself on track for those who maybe, they struggle with that just a
Yeah.
bit?
Well, one, I believe your body is your business. So physical fundamentals are so important about sleep, diet, exercise. For me, meditation is a huge part of how I get ready for the day, and reading morning rituals, what's important to you, optimizing for your best energy windows for your most important work. When are you the most energized, awake, and creative? And do your most important projects then. Don't let email creep into every hour of the day. So I don't even check email usually until 10 or 11 a.m. after I've already wound up for the day. Then I'll say, if you've done all that or you're doing all that and you're not motivated, it can be a sign of one of two things. One, you're just tired and your body wants a rest. And it's not a problem with the work, it's just your body saying, give me a break. This is my guilty pleasure. Sometimes I'll watch a Netflix show in the morning instead of reading like an important nonfiction book. But sometimes that feeling of not feeling motivated is actually a sign of a pivot point, or that this project or client or type of work or what you're doing is not resonating. Because I believe whether it comes to health and fitness or our work, it's the intrinsic motivation that keeps us going. When we have to start to invoke willpower, willpower is a limited resource and it dwindles throughout the day. So if you're having to apply willpower too much to your projects, it's very likely that you are ready for some change, and then you can apply the pivot method even within those projects. So you can say, well, what is working here and how can I move forward in a way that I do feel motivated by? So I've done that. I launched a private online community called Momentum, and I got stuck. I was about to launch and I'm like, this doesn't feel good. And I wasn't liking all the tasks I had around the launch. And so instead of doing a typical online marketing launch, I created a 3-week momentum safari. And every day is an animal avatar, and it was fun, creative prompts. And that's what felt good to me. So, and I did that by using the pivot method. So, and that's free, by the way. So you can find out more about that on my sites as well. Yeah. So, and by the way, it's top secret right now, but I also have a pivot method workbook that goes with the book in case any of you are interested. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. This was such a powerful workshop today. And thank you all for attending and for staying after a little bit. Once more, if you fill out that feedback form, you'll be entered into the drawing for a chance to win Jenny's book, Pivot, and Pierre Kwan's The Perfect 15-Minute Day Journal. Thank you all again. And Jenny, thank you so, so much. It was amazing. And I look forward to having you all at a future session.
Thank you, Melissa, and huge thanks to everybody for being here. It's such a sign of your high net growthness to take an hour out of your day just to be here and do this reflection. So kudos and thank you again.
Exactly. Wonderful, Jenny. Thank you all again and have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.